Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones is the second Star Wars film directed by George Lucas and is widely regarded as the worst. Although I think this is not true personally, I believe this film is a lot more rewatchable than Episode 1 and just has a better plot. Now, while I said I liked the film, it is nowhere near my favourite Star Wars film. To see my full list, watch my Star Wars films ranked. I'll put a link in the description. Something I love about this film is the final battle. The first thing that makes this finale so good is the colour palette they used to create it. The colour gradient is an orange-yellow mix that perfectly encapsulates Geonosis as a whole. Planet is a lonely planet in the Star Wars universe and is often regarded by the core planets as nothing more than a giant, desolate rock floating in space, and the Geonosians themselves as uneducated bugs. This makes the colour palette make more sense in context of the film. Other than that, the finale has plenty of action. It has the record for most lightsabers on screen at one time. Also, the Jedi Council finally gets some action in this film, establishing a lot of characters that get their full story explained later in the Clone Wars 2003, and more recent one, Star Wars The Clone Wars. This is also the first time we ever got to see Yoda finally engage in a lightsaber duel. The villain Count Dooku is superbly played by the late Christopher Lee, and he is a more interesting villain in my opinion. As while Darth Maul looked cool, he had no personality to speak of. However, I think Dooku is given a lot more screen time, which personally I think he deserved. So his escape at the end was certainly unexpected, as I'm fairly sure most believed he would die at the end of this film, and there would be a new villain in the third prequel. Now let's move away from the finale and talk a little bit about the rest of the film. My opinion is extremely divided on the rest of the film. The first aspect that I think deserved more merit than it gets is Obi-Wan Kenobi Kamino subplot. It was fun to see Obi-Wan Kenobi play the investigator for once and actually discover stuff. Now, before I continue, I do need to say something. First time anyone ever sees this film, they will think it is a complete, complicated mess. Because if you aren't an avid Star Wars fan like myself, while watching this film, all the political talk will just overwhelm you, so if you want to get the maximum enjoyment out of the film, I recommend that you do this film, and its prequel, The Approaching Storm, which is only available in book form. And if you're a bit confused about what happens between this film and the next, I recommend reading Decestus Deception, Jedi Trial, Labyrinth of Evil, and watching the 2003 Clone Wars micro-series and the newest Clone Wars, which will all help in understanding the film better. Anyway, back to the film. The Kamino subplot, in my opinion, does make up for the lesser areas of this film, like the Anakin and Padme love story. This is rightfully regarded as the worst love story in Star Wars and just drags on and on. Although I do think that the way they formatted the transitions between the story worked well. The planet they chose for this romance was of course Padme's home planet of Naboo. This setting was granted, understandable, but still didn't help with the love story being not believable and falling flat on itself. Meanwhile, though, R2-D2 and C-3PO provide some fair comic relief, a high improvement of Jar Jar Binks in the previous film. Speaking of Jar Jar, his role in this film is immensely smaller than in The Phantom Menace, and less Jar Jar is always something to be happy about. I'm too angry about Boba Fett's origins in this film being included. I thought it bounced fairly well with the plot, and absolutely love Django in the film. Some complain about Count Dooku not appearing till an hour through the film. Personally, I think this serves the mystery factor and just helps make his appearance grander than before. Other than Palpatine, I think that Dooku is probably my favourite villain of the prequels. I would have been General Grievous, but I think he wasn't handled very well in Revenge of the Sith. Dooku to me just seems like a more in-depth and well-rounded character than Maul and Grievous. Mace Windu, I think, also gets to do more in this film and is genuinely just a good character. For some reason, I've always had a fascination with Kit Fisto, probably from his involvement in the Clone Wars micro-series, and in this film and Revenge of the Sith, I think he got some much-needed screen time. The Senate's corruption, which I think is one of the best aspects of the prequels, also gets explored in the film to an insane level. Palpatine's easy manipulation of the masses assures him absolute control of the Senate. Jar Jar Binks to give him emergency powers, which also adds to the Darth Jar Jar theory, but I'll probably make a different video on that altogether. Your chase at the beginning of the film also deserves some discussion. CGI in this scene was a lot better than in The Phantom Menace, as the technology was more capable then of supporting George's needs. The speeder chase is an interesting event and shows off how big Coruscant is, and showing the lower levels aren't just clean and fancy Senate buildings. Instead, we get to see bars and gambling, which in my opinion is more interesting than other parts of Coruscant we've seen over the years. I understand that obviously it would be harder to see those parts as nothing really happens down there. That's why I'm extremely disappointed we didn't get to see the underworld show George Lucas had planned, but again, I'll make a video on that another time. Another good thing about the sequence is that we finally get to see how ruthless Jango Fett is to get what he wants. He kills his apprentice just for spilling information. Next, let's move on to the Kamino area of the film. This worked well as something to keep the audience's attention while the other boring love plot takes place. I think the Obi-Wan and Jango Fett fight is one of the best in the prequels and is quite fun and interesting. I enjoyed the space part the most, with plenty of inventive technology being used, really showing off the imagination of George Lucas. As for the ground fight of the area, I think it's got some nice choreography and is well paced. Young Boba Fett's acting isn't great, but it's miles above Jake Lord's acting. I'm going to talk a lot about the negative aspects of this film. Let's start with the biggest flaw being the love story between Anakin and Padme. This is one of the worst love stories in the history of cinema, and the dialogue is incredibly unrealistic. Christensen and Natalie Portman have no chemistry, and their acting is just awful. That being said, I do think that when Anakin goes to hunt the Tusken Raiders, his acting improves considerably. The reason why this part of the movie fails is also because it's just not realistic and is not good in any way at all. Now, while that is my biggest criticism of the film, it isn't my only. Yet the rest are very minor. Is it just me, or does anyone else notice how not aerodynamic those giant sphere ships the Separatists came in are? Spent more time developing that. Another minor criticism is why is Newt Gunray still there? Like, you think Palpatine would have killed him considering he completely failed the last film. We'd see what Tambor though, I think he has genuinely nice and original character design. Other than that, I honestly don't think there is much else I dislike in this film. The only reason I put it near the bottom of a Star Wars list is that the rest of the films are simply better. Now, I think it might be fun to look at some of the IMDb and Rotten Tomato reviews for this film. The top review gave it a 7 out of 10 and says great scale, action and mystery squares off with bad romance and dialogue, which I think is fair. The second highest review gave it only a 5 out of 10 and says intriguing plot, poor screenplay, which is fair, but I think it definitely deserves higher than 5. Gave it 9 out of 10 and says underrated Star Wars adventure, full of intrigue, drama and jaw-dropping fun, which I think is absolutely true. While I wouldn't give it a 9 out of 10, which is what they gave, maybe an 8, but I do agree with it. The first review says bringing Christopher Lee into the mix has an undeniable appeal that reminds of Peter Cushing's involvement in the original 1977 film, which is pretty fair, and I like how he praises Christopher Lee. Finally, we have this review here, probably the most difficult of the Star Wars films to take in, maybe titled The Last Jedi, but the one with the biggest payoff if you do, which I 100% agree with. This film began in June 2000 and ended in September 2000. Location shooting took place in the Tunisian desert, I think it's pronounced, at the Plaza de España. But I'm fairly sure it was the same location shooting as A New Hope. Funny was that Samuel Jackson actually asked George Lucas personally for a purple lightsaber. Reshoots were performed in March 2001. During this time, a new action sequence was developed featuring the droid factory after Lucas had decided that the film lacked a quick enough pace in the corresponding time frame, which is agreeable because if they removed the sequence, it would be a lot slower in that area. This film, Attack of the Clones, took CGI at the time to the next level, with genuinely only one scene that isn't CGI at all. Now to visual effects. The film relied almost solely on visual animatics as opposed to storyboards in order to pre-visualize sequences for early editing in the film's production. This meant that films had no guarantee of aging well, and while it didn't perfectly hold up, it still holds up quite well today. Basically all there is to say about this film. I hope you liked the video, consider subscribing, thanks for watching, and bye.